Welcome to Wicken Fen, one of Britain's oldest nature reserves and one of its wildest. This magical place has been cared for by the National Trust since 1899, making it our very first nature reserve. Over 10,000 species have been recorded here, from hundreds of tiny insects to plants, flowers, lizards, snakes, newts, mammals and rare birds, making it the most recorded species-rich site in the entire country. For centuries, this was a working landscape. People cut peat out of the ground to burn for fuel. They harvested a tough plant called sedge for putting on the roofs of their houses to stop the rain coming in. And they grazed livestock. Today, the National Trust cares for Wicken Fen to look after the special wildlife that lives here. And it's expanding, it's getting bigger, reconnecting wild spaces across the fens and giving nature the room it needs to thrive. As a ranger here, I get to see Wicken Fen change through the seasons, which I really love. And in this live lesson, we'll explore how wildlife prepares for winter, which species stay, which move on, and how people, like my workmates and I, help care for the nature through the coldest months of the year. A typical day starts early, checking on the herds of conic ponies and Highland cattle that graze the reserve all year round. And they're more than just a lovely sight, they're part of how we manage the land naturally. Because if you were to go back hundreds of years, there was much more wildlife in this landscape, but there also would have been similar large animals, which are now extinct, and they would graze the fen, keeping it open, enabling thousands of different species of wildlife to thrive here. Every animal is checked daily. We look for signs of injury or illness and make sure that the fences are in good condition so that the animals can't escape. It's a big job with miles of boundaries to patrol, but it's rewarding, and these animals help keep the fen wild in the most natural way possible. And they're all kind of individual personalities, which is lovely too. And we call this approach rewilding through grazing, which is letting nature lead, but also giving it a helping hand where needed. So the conics and cattle live outside on the nature reserve all year round, and they even have their babies out here, foals and calves, which live their whole long happy lives in this beautiful place, able to behave naturally and to live with their families. As autumn fades, Wicken Fen becomes a refuge for wildlife. Some species migrate, some hibernate, and others stay put, adapting to the cold. From Scandinavia come fieldfares and redwings, birds that fly hundreds of miles to feast on berries and apples here. They're members of the thrush family, which also includes the blackbird, and their long flight here is called a migration. The reason they make this migration is for the apples and the berries, which they need to survive, because they can't get as many back in Scandinavia, so that's the reason they fly all the way to England. Over the reed beds here, you might spot a hen harrier, a graceful bird of prey, which is very rare, and it visits us in the winter from upland Britain. And these beautiful birds need somewhere safe to roost overnight. They like to tuck themselves away in amongst the tall reeds and grasses, where they're hidden from animals like foxes that may want to try and catch and eat them. So Wicken Fen is a safe place for them to hide away at night during the winter and to rest without the fear of being disturbed. At dusk, as night falls, short-eared owls glide low over Burwell Fen, hunting for voles and small mammals. And these are probably my favourite. In some years there are less voles, which means there are less owls, but in other years there's lots. And there's also our resident birds, species that live here all year round, like the marsh harrier and kingfishers, and they rely on this rich wetland habitat which we maintain. I've got a question for you now. Which birds stay in the UK for winter, and which ones fly away? great answers there. Birds like robins, wrens and blackbirds stay here year-round, whereas others like swallows and warblers migrate south to Africa for warmth and food. And then new visitors arrive, our winter migrants, like swans, geese and fieldfares, thrush species from the Arctic north. And so winter isn't quiet, it's just different life on the move. Mammals such as otters, water voles and various species of deer stay active through the winter too, but they change their behaviour. They feed more efficiently and they seek shelter in the thick reed beds and the scrub. Some animals hunker down and hibernate, which is like going to sleep for the winter. Frogs and newts bury themselves in the mud, bats find cool, safe roosts, and some insects overwinter as eggs or pupae, although some butterflies will head to dry places like a garden shed or a garage and spend the winter in there. Queen bees will shelter underneath a protective layer of fallen autumn leaves. Every creature has its own strategy for survival. Question: what do animals need to survive when it's cold? Lots of great ideas there. So shelter is really key, food and energy. Some grow thicker coats, some build up fat, and others store food or slow down their metabolism to save energy. Even here on the fen, we make sure there's plenty of safe habitat for them, like the reed beds, the rough grass, and the wet pools full of food. While nature rests, we get busy. Winter is when we do a lot of habitat management, which involves cutting the reeds and sedge, clearing the scrub, and keeping the wetlands in good shape. Although the ponies and the cattle do a good job of grazing and helping to keep the fen open, and they create a different variety of habitats, we also need to help this work by cutting some of the thicker areas of bushes and the small trees, and we do this with our electric chainsaws. We also have some specialist kit like our fen harvester. This can work on the soft peaty ground without sinking because it runs on tracks rather than wheels, and this means we can operate in conditions where the water might be up to our knees. We also mount a wood chipper onto the harvester, which cuts the bushes and trees into wood chip, and we use this to put on the footpaths to stop them from getting too muddy during the winter. This cut vegetation, the grass, sedge and reeds, is piled into Duffy heaps, which are mounds of litter that rot down, creating warm mini habitats for insects and spiders. And it's a bit like a compost heap, so it holds heat and that kind of attracts these creatures, and they come and stay warm and it helps them through the winter. And they're called Duffy heaps because a scientist named Eric Duffy discovered that they're such a great place for beetles and other insects and did lots of research about them. We also manage water carefully. Wicken Fen is a wetland nature reserve, which means it relies on water. So we raise the levels up to flood certain areas to create the perfect winter feeding zones for ducks like widgeon that migrate here all the way from the Arctic Circle, and also other water birds like egrets and herons. And every drop of water counts because the peat soil needs to be kept wet to stop it releasing harmful carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So our wetland management doesn't help just to create homes for birds and other wildlife, but it also helps us too by reducing the impact of climate change. And wetlands also are beautiful, relaxing places for us to walk and just spend time. Scrub clearance helps stop trees from taking over the precious fenland. Without it, woodland would slowly replace the rare fen habitats, and all the while, the grazing animals continue their quiet work. the conics rooting for rhizomes, which are like roots, and the highland cattle browsing on willow and rushes, and this really helps to shape this perfect varied landscape. Another question: why are wetlands like Wicken Fen important in the wintertime? Well, some great ideas there, and it's because they act like giant sponges, soaking up floodwater, storing carbon, and providing food and shelter for wildlife. In winter, when other places freeze or dry out, wetlands stay alive. They're vital for the migrating birds and for helping to tackle climate change. Winter at Wicken Fen might look quiet, but there's so much going on. Every bird, insect, and mammal has its own way of coping with the cold. Some fly away to warmer countries, some snuggle down to sleep, and others stay here, finding clever ways to survive. I've got a question for you now. How do you get ready for winter? And do animals do the same? Some great answers there. And of course, yeah, we do things like putting on coats, turning up the heating, and stocking up on food. And these are things that animals do the same, but in their own way. They grow thicker fur, store energy, and find shelter. Just like us, they're preparing to get through the season ahead. As rangers, our job is to help them by looking after their homes, keeping the wetlands wet, making space for new ponds and reeds, and checking on our animals, the conics and the highland cattle. They keep working all through the winter, helping to shape the landscape just by grazing and trampling. A question for you now. What do you think a ranger packs for a day out on the fen? Well, yeah, lots of great answers there. Warm clothes are really important, waterproofs for when it's wet, a map's useful, first aid kit, radio, binoculars, fencing tools, and of course a flask of tea, because you never know what the day might bring out here. Even though the days are shorter and colder, there's still beauty everywhere. Nature doesn't stop in winter, it just slows down, ready for spring to come around again the next year. And I love sharing these stories because I want everyone to see just how amazing these wild spaces are and why they need our care. And now it's your turn to be nature detectives. Here's your challenge. Make your own seasonal wildlife calendar, a year-round wheel of nature. Draw a big circle and divide it into 4 sections: spring, summer, autumn and winter. Then think about which animals are active, which ones migrate, and which hibernate in each season. You could draw swallows flying south in the autumn, hedgehogs hibernating in the winter, frogs waking up in the spring, and dragonflies zooming around in the summer. Add colours, arrows, and notes to show how the seasons connect, and by the end, you'll have drawn your own beautiful wildlife year. Remember, nature's story never really ends. There's always something new to discover, every season of the year.
So, how long have you been a ranger for?
That's a great question. I've been a ranger for, I think it's about 12 years now. So when I was at school, I knew that I loved nature and I learnt that you could make a career out of working on a nature reserve as a ranger. So I thought, yeah, that's absolutely what I want to do. So I went and I did a course, I'd studied and I did lots of volunteering. And then 12 years ago, I got a job as a ranger. And here I am a few years later, still enjoying it as much as I did when I first started.
Amazing. That definitely comes across as well. So, you mentioned studying. So, it links to another question of what qualifications do you have and what qualifications do you need?
That's a great question. So I did a degree. So I went to university with lots of other wonderful people, made some great friends, and did a course called Countryside Management, which basically taught you everything you need to know about looking after habitats and sort of conserving rare spaces for nature. So I have a qualification in that regard, a degree. I did GCSEs and A levels as well. So I did quite a lot of study, I guess, as well as practical experience. So, for example, I've got a chainsaw certificate because you can't just use a chainsaw because they're really dangerous. So I've done courses on things like that. But you don't need all of these to become a ranger. Some of my colleagues, they didn't go to university. They perhaps went to college or even just did a bit of volunteering or an apprenticeship and then got a job as a ranger. So that's the journey I took. But there's different ways that you can do it depending on how much study you're interested in doing.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, it's important to highlight all those different routes. So we have things like apprenticeships all across Wales, Scotland, and England, and there's a new apprenticeship in ecology coming next year as well. And I guess the key is to choose the learning style that suits you and how you learn best, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, some people it's more hands-on, other people more practical. And that's the great thing about working as a ranger. There's so many different elements to it. And there's some rangers that do more work with schools and doing guided walks and sort of talking to people. Then there's some that kind of do more with animals. I do a lot with animals, so I've got also some qualifications in like administering painkillers and things like that for the occasional times when we need them. So yeah, there's different routes, different ways. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Amazing variety, thank you. So I think it was clear during seeing you in action there, but do you enjoy your job?
No, I hate it. No, I'm joking. Yeah, I do really love it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you saw in the video there some of the lovely little foals and the calves. So I enjoy the wonderful livestock that I work with. They do an important job. I love birds. I love nature. So yeah, being out doing jobs like, for example, we might be repairing a fence just to keep the livestock safe, to keep them in the area where they're supposed to live. And then you might see an owl fly past. And so these little things happen, and that I really enjoy that. But I really enjoy when people come and ask questions and come and visit, and I enjoy sharing it as well. So that's the thing. I think when you're looking after wildlife, you've got to look after the habitat, you've got to look after the places, these important nature reserves, but also look after people, welcome them so that they can come and enjoy and appreciate it as well. And I hope that all of you enjoy visiting nature spots near where you live.
Sure they do, depending on the weather, of course.
Well,
Which
yes.
you have to be out in all weathers, I guess.
That's right. So that's why it's important that we wrap up warm. Got my nice warm fleece. Yeah. And yeah, so that's one thing. If you're interested in becoming a ranger, don't think it's sunny all the time. You will be out there in the rain, in the cold, even in the snow sometimes. But there's a wonderful quote that is there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. So we just make sure we take the right clothing, the right equipment, and we do our best.
Nice, and that flask of tea that you mentioned as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to smush two questions together here. So it's a two-pronged one. So what inspired you, and I'm going to adapt this slightly. So what inspired you to work with wildlife, and what made you become a ranger out of all the different choices that we're hearing this week of different careers there are to go? So
Yeah. So I just, I kind of, I suppose it started with like feeding ducks on the river as a child. I became interested in wetlands and ducks and birds, and just the fact that they change throughout the year. You know, some like for example, there's a bird called the great crested grebe, which have these orange and white and black kind of crests in the summer. Then in the winter they lose that and they become sort of grey and less obvious. And so I was learning about all the different kind of the ways that wildlife adapts throughout the year. And yeah, there's lots of ways you can work with nature. For example, an ecologist. Some of my friends are ecologists. Yeah, there's obviously all the other great things that are going on this week, other great careers. But for me, I think I just love being out in wild places and just seeing nature and kind of being able to help kind of create those habitats. So, for example, like with a wetland, the nice thing is that you can create new wetlands, and we can do this in our gardens as well, just by putting out a little bit of a small sunken washing up bowl or something. Dig a little hole, let some water come, and then you might get frogs coming or dragonflies. And we do that on a bigger scale, and being able to make that difference and create these habitats, and then see nature come and move in. That's what I wanted to do, and so that's what I'm really lucky to do now. That's what attracted me to being a ranger, I think.
amazing. I love that idea of scaling it down to your garden as well. Great crested grebes. I love a great crested grebe. I swear they play a game with me. I was out at the weekend and I pointed it out to a friend. And the thing is, because they're divers, obviously, aren't they, as well? Every time I point one out, they disappear underwater and I end up standing there for a minute saying there definitely is one there. Just keep watching and it will come back up and eventually it reappears again.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned your wetland there in Wicken Fen. So how many species do you have on the fen?
That's a really good question because we've been counting them for 200 years. And this year, amazingly, we reached over 10,000 different species. So we are the most recorded species rich site in the whole of the United Kingdom because there's no other place that's recorded 10,000 species. And not all of them are still here. That, you know, you won't be able to come and see them all on one day. But yeah, because we've been recording for so long. And so a lot of these are tiny little insects, microscopic flies. We've got lots of different species of moths. So all kinds of creatures, great and small, mostly small, live at Wicken. So it's a really important place. And so that's why it's important that we look after this wetland habitat so that all these different species can live here.
Amazing. 200 years of recording. So presumably, will those 10,000 species include like a bird that's been blown off course, landed on Wicken Fen for a day, and then went back to its home country again?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's species that live here all year round, like robins, but then there are things that, yeah, have maybe turned up out of the blue and surprised us. Like a couple of years ago, we had a white-tailed eagle. And there's more of those in England now, but there's not been many at Wicken before.
That's cool. We talked about them
Species.
at the start of the week, being called a flying bandora, an eagle or white-tailed eagle, because if you see one, you know that you've seen one and not something else that's slightly smaller. So you mentioned species there. Here's another question. Do you have rare or endangered species?
Yes, we do. We do have a few that are rare and endangered. For example, we've got some species of moth that are only found in two or three places in the whole of the UK. There's one called the silver-barred moth, and that lives on a specific type of grass that grows in wet fen areas. And so there's some species that literally you can hardly find anywhere else in the whole of the UK. So yes, and then there's some that are a bit more common now, but some like the marsh harrier, for example, a bird of prey that was nearly extinct about 50 years ago. There was only one pair left in England, and because we've created more reed bed, they're making a comeback, but they're still special. So there's lots of species that you don't always see every day, but they're there lurking in the reeds, and it's really important because some of them are really endangered.
Amazing. I love those moments when you spot an animal like that as well. And speaking of favorite moments. So, what is your favorite creature in the wetlands?
That's a really good question. I think I'm a bit of a lover of cute, fluffy things, to be honest. I used to work with seals many years ago. We have had seals at Wicken. There was one got very lost, but my favourite creature to see here, and I've only seen it once, is an otter because they're mostly active at night time. But they're very appealing, very lovely animals. And yeah, I saw one very early one morning when I was out doing a bird survey. I heard a plop. I looked in the water, and an otter poked its head up, and that was just absolutely fantastic.
That's so cool as well. So, yeah, if you hear a plop in the water, have a look because it could be an otter or a water vole, couldn't it, as well?
Water
Both
vole as well. Mm.
species. So, all right. So, speaking of plopping in the water, what's the messiest job you do as a ranger?
Probably the messiest job is so our livestock mostly live out like wild animals outside throughout the year, but every now and then we sometimes sell them to other places. There might be another nature reserve or sometimes even a private farm that want to do a bit of kind of creating a wild habitat, and they don't want it to go too overgrown, so they might want a conic pony or two, or maybe a Highland cow, and so we load them into a trailer. And then sometimes, if they're not too far away, I've delivered a cow to a farm, and yeah, I mean, if you're driving for an hour and they've been eating lots of grass, then sometimes they do go to the toilet inside, and then afterwards, cleaning with a hose and a pressure washer and a broom, cleaning out the trailer after a cow's been in a trailer. That's probably the messiest job, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I having been a ranger, RJ, I empathise with that. And it's best done straight away, isn't it? Because when it dries on a few days later, that's a much different job as well. Okay, so right, number of species related ones before we come back onto career related ones. What's the biggest animal on the fen?
The biggest animal on the fen, um, well, it's probably what's his name? Bear. We have a one of the Highland cows. They've all got names. He's in his teens and he's a very big boy. He probably weighs half a ton. So Bear, one of our Highland cows, he's the biggest animal on the fen.
Nice, I love a Highland cow. Right, what reptiles, if any, are at Wicken Fen?
Yeah, we have got some reptiles. We have common lizards. So yeah, actually in the summer, because it's been quite a hot summer this year, the boardwalk, I think you saw in the video I was near that wind pump in the background, just out there, and there's a boardwalk that goes past there, and in the summer the lizards, the common lizards will bask in the sun, so they're really nice to see.
Amazing. Okay, so right, back to some job related ones. Do you work solo or with a team?
That's a good question. You didn't really see many of my colleagues in the video, I don't think, except for the animals. But there is a team of, well, there's five of us that are lucky enough to be paid, paid rangers. And then also we have about 25 volunteers, mostly some retired people, some retired school teachers, actually, and various professionals. So it's a small team, but we work together. And for example, if we've got a big job like well, clearing an overgrown patch of trees, we'll do that in a group together to motivate each other. And sometimes we even get volunteer parties coming in. So we have people coming for their kind of work socials. There's some businesses in Cambridge that come down and join us. So we're a small team, but we work with lots of other people to achieve the work that we can achieve.
Amazing, thank you. So, what time do you start work and what time do you get back?
Ooh, that's a good question. So normally we start at 8 o'clock in the morning. Now I know a lot of jobs tend to start at 9 o'clock, but this time of year, as we get into the winter, if we start at 8 and we finish at 4, so we finish an hour earlier because when you get to mid-December, when you get in towards 4 o'clock, it's getting dark and we can't be out obviously chainsawing trees in the dark. So we start a bit earlier, finish a bit later, in theory, but some days we're out a bit longer, especially in the summer if there's lots going on or we've got a busy job or very rarely, if an animal needs some attention, we'll be out a bit longer. So you have to be flexible in this role, but generally it's 8 to 4. But I like it when I finish at 4 because I get home a little bit earlier than some of the other people.
Especially this time of the year while it's still just about light, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Ajay, so a bit of a personal question, so feel free to not answer it if you don't want to, but what age did you start your job?
What age did I start my job? Okay, so when I graduated from university, I was 21, I think. And so I first started working as a ranger when I was 21. I had some seasonal jobs, so like a summer job on the coast, working with nesting birds. But I've been in this job for the last 7 years, and I'm 36 now.
You don't look it. Um, So that kind of half answers another question was, did you have any jobs before this one? But I guess I'm interested, did you have any jobs that you did before you worked in conservation?
Yeah, I did. So I was lucky that I've sort of followed this path since I was a teenager. So I've wanted to work as a ranger. But while I was volunteering to get that experience and while I was studying, I did some other jobs. So when I was doing my A levels, when I was 16, I worked in my local supermarket, local shop. And that was good because I did lots of talking to people. I was working on the tills. And so I enjoyed chatting to people. Sometimes I'd even talk about wildlife, but normally it was about shopping. And then I worked in a bar for a little while. I sort of did pot washing, sort of washing the plates and things. And yeah, so I've done a couple of jobs like that. And fruit picking even as well, which was nice because that was outdoors. So I've done a few different things.
But, like, I love the idea of you trying to convert people to loving wildlife in a supermarket as well. So, all right, question here. What's the coolest animal you've seen on the fen?
Oh, the coolest animal. Um, I would say, I mean, I'm a bit of a bird lover. One day we were out, a group of us on the fen about this time of year, and this we saw this strange bird we'd never seen before. It was kind of big and black and white, and it had a really big sort of red bill. And I thought, what's that? And it was a stork, which was really cool because I'd never seen a stork in England before, but they have been reintroduced down in the south, in Sussex, and they're gradually spreading. And yeah, that was really cool to see a stork when I wasn't expecting to see one.
Amazing. Okay, so if you didn't get a job as a ranger, what job would you pick?
Oh, that's a really good job. A really good question. So I like drawing and artwork and sort of drawing. So I was thinking about being a graphic designer really before I went down the conservation route. So I quite enjoy that. And I think, yeah, that overlaps a little bit doing illustrations. That's what I'd like to do if I wasn't doing this. But the nice thing is I can do that in my spare time, I guess.
Do you ever get to use that in your job?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to publish a book actually about ranger work, and there's a few of my drawings in there. And sometimes, yeah, when we're doing projects, so we might make a sign, or we have trails, seasonal trails, which sometimes have an art focus. And so there's always a chance to whether it's just writing a sign in nice handwriting and drawing a few pictures of birds or wildlife on. Yeah, it's something that I can squeeze in every now and then.
Nice. Okay. Right. What is the average salary for a ranger?
Right. So the average salary for a ranger isn't necessarily that high compared to some of the other jobs. You're looking at kind of maybe between 25 to 30,000 pounds a year for the kind of entry level grade. And then maybe if you then end up being like a lead ranger or a supervisor ranger, it might be a little bit more. So it's not huge money, but as you can hopefully tell, it's really nice work that's really fulfilling. And I think a lot of people do it not to get rich, but to kind of feel enriched, if you like, because of the satisfaction, the job satisfaction. But it's enough money to live on. And so, yeah, it suits me fine.
Okay, cracking answer. Thank you. Okay, has any animal been violent towards you, or are they all pretty chill?
Ooh, so I have a memory of a bird called the grey partridge. So a bit like you might see pheasants in the countryside, a sort of a small brown bird. They're native, the grey partridge, and I stumbled across some once that had just hatched their chicks, and so they'd been incubating these eggs for several weeks. Their chicks had just hatched, and they were just leading them away from the nest. And I happened to stumble into the picture at this time, and these adults were really protective. Their chicks were young, and they didn't really sort of know how to walk even, so they needed to keep them safe. And these adult grey partridges started kind of jumping at me and flapping and making this horrible noise, and I pretty much ran away because that's what they wanted me to do, to leave them in peace. So if they've got young that they're protecting, animals can be very protective. So they're not being horrible, they're just trying to protect their young ones. So that's the only times of animals being slightly vicious was when they were protecting their young.
Okay, that's good that you're still with us after that great partridge attack. So I'm guessing the animal that you just mentioned is not the answer to this question, but have you always been interested in animals, and do you have any pets?
Oh, that's a good question as well. Lots of good questions. I've always loved animals. Yes. As I said, I like watching ducks and birds as a youngster. But I do have a pet dog as well. I have a lovely black Labrador called Oakley, who comes with me on the reserve sometimes. He's not with me today, but yeah, and it's important that actually I keep him on a lead when I'm out walking because often we've got the birds who we're talking about that have perhaps flown thousands of miles to come here for the winter. And so Oakley and I go around and we're respectful to the nature and to the birds. But he's a lovely friend and he's always happy to see me, which is always nice.
Okay. Do you enjoy your job in winter?
In winter, yes, I do. Yes, it takes a little bit more motivation, I think, especially as you get into like January, February. And if it's cold when you wake up and it's dark outside, then sometimes it can be a little bit harder to stay motivated. But I do enjoy it because I never regret it once I get out there. And sometimes you start off too cold, but then you might start doing some practical work and you warm up and you might see an owl fly past or just the way that the sort of frost sparkles in the sunlight sometimes. So I do enjoy it in the winter as well, because actually, I think if I'm truly honest, I think Wicken Fen's its most beautiful on a winter's day.
I think that leans into the variety, doesn't it? I remember as a ranger, I always looked forward to every season, but then by the end of the season, I'd always kind of wish the next one was coming along. I always enjoyed putting on my heavy winter wear, but then by February, I'd be like, I could do with a bit of sun now. So it's that it keeps up with the changes, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so from one extreme of cold working to a question about heat, during heat waves, do any of the animals need extra care to cool off?
So they're very well adapted. And the reason we've chosen these animals is because they do well in this environment. Because the idea is that we don't have to do too much with them, that they can look after themselves. But it can be challenging when it's hot. It's important they have enough water. And so when it starts to dry out, like it did a couple of years ago, that really hot summer, that can be a challenge. So we have to make sure there's plenty of drinking water. But then as long as there's some areas of wet mud, quite often the animals are quite good at kind of finding the wet mud to sort of roll around and cool themselves down in. So it can be a challenge. And obviously, if we get warmer and warmer summers, then yeah, it's important that they have some shade to be able to keep out of the sunlight. But generally, they're quite good. And with the wildlife as well, yeah, some birds they need that water around them to protect them from predators. And if it gets too dry, then they might choose not to nest here. So yeah, climate change is something we're concerned about. But on the whole, the animals do pretty well here.
Okay, so okay, two jobs here, two jobs, two questions that are similar to each other. Do you ever get tired of working as a ranger? Are there any times that it can be hard and stressful?
Yeah, so I mean, most people tend to think we have this lovely life where we're out in the sunshine and enjoying ourselves all the time, and we are quite often. But sometimes it can be physically tiring. If we have, I mentioned earlier when we're moving livestock and loading them into a trailer, for example, that sounds simple, but it can take hours of preparation because these are semi-wild animals. And sometimes by the end of the day, if you're kind of running around and on your feet all the day, then yeah, you can feel a little bit tired. And sometimes, like we've had a big fence repair project and we're out kind of day after day doing the same job, putting in fences, then you can sometimes feel a bit tired. But you have to look at the bigger picture and you think, well, I'm doing this because it's important work. So and because we've got a good team of people that motivate each other and we kind of tell each other jokes and just make each other laugh while we're working. And yeah, I get tired sometimes, but never tired of being a ranger in general.
Okay, that makes sense. Back to your love of drawing. What are your favorite things to draw?
Ah, I like drawing horses. Yeah, I like drawing the horses, and sort of like cartoons. And I like drawing birds as well. I like drawing faces. So people and birds, but also landscapes. If I'm just kind of like doodling, I'll generally draw a river and a tree and maybe a moon and an owl or something like that. So kind of the kind of stuff I see every day, really.
Okay, you work in some really beautiful places, so the inspiration is there for you, I guess. Have any animals ever escaped?
Yes, they have. So most of the time, they have quite quiet lives. But the horses in particular are because they behave like wild animals. So you've got lead stallions that have groups of females of the mares, and they have family groups. And sometimes you might get a confident younger horse that kind of challenges one of the lead stallions, and there might be a little bit of drama playing out, and then it can get a little bit whipped up into a frenzy for a few minutes. And once or twice, there's been a case where a younger female's got caught up in the middle of all this drama and she's just jumped out of sort of fright and jumped over a fence. So we have had to let them back in. But the interesting thing is they've got this herd mentality. So they don't sort of suddenly wander into the nearest town and walk down the high street and cause problems. They want to get back to their friends, to their family. So they kind of walk along the edge of the fence usually and they're nearby. And then what we have to do is kind of get them to the nearest gate, open it and get them through. But if the nearest gate's a bit too far away, they won't want to walk away from their family. So we have to sometimes cut the fence and then rejoin it. So we have had some escapes, but never a full-on escape. They've never gone far.
Not wandering off for their hot chocolate down in the high street then in that case.
Not yet.
Okay. Right. How big is Wicken Fen?
How big is Wicken Fen? So Wicken Fen is nearly 2,000 acres. It's very many football pitches actually. I can't remember how many, but it's quite a few square miles. So it's kind of the size of a small town really, spread out across Cambridgeshire. So if you were to cycle from one end to the other, that's probably about 4 miles to get from one end to the other. So it's quite a big place.
Okay, I love that. And I work in sports pitches, so I've just looked it up, 2,500 football pitches. That's a
Wow.
lot of football pitches. So let's go with two more and see how much time we've got left. So when is the best time to visit Wicken Fen?
Ooh, well, we were talking about the wonder of the different seasons, and I think really the best time to visit is 4 times a year and see all the 4 seasons. I'd said winter's really quite beautiful, but also in the spring, summer when you've got all the flowers out and maybe cuckoos singing and all the dragonflies. So if you can only come once, I would say the month of June probably, but otherwise, if you come in December as well. And we have some Christmas events as well and Christmas trails. So that's another reason to come. So either summer or winter, but ideally both.
Okay, that is a great reason to come. Okay, let's finish up. I think this is a very excellent, natural last question to finish up on, which what is your favorite thing about being a ranger?
My favorite thing about being a ranger. I think actually my favorite thing is when we get some of the school trips come, and I love it when we get folks coming down and going pond dipping, and dipping nets into the water and seeing what wildlife lurks under the surface and some of the weird and wonderful creatures. And yeah, I love seeing them myself, but I also love seeing people that have never visited before enjoying that excitement of pond dipping and discovering places like Wicken Fen for themselves. So that's what I love most, I think.
Amazing, inspiring other people, which is what I hope and I'm sure you've done today. The amount of interactivity and questions have been immense. So thank you all for taking part and listening to Ajay and interacting today with the session. I hope you've learned a lot about being a ranger and, obviously some of the other jobs that work alongside Ajay as well at Wicken Fen. Ajay, is there any key message you'd like to leave us on in terms of careers in rangering?
Oh, yeah, I would say, as you've heard, you're not going to be a millionaire if you work being a ranger, but it is really fulfilling work. It is lovely to be able to spend time with wildlife and make a difference. But it takes a bit of determination, a bit of motivation to work in all the different seasons, and you don't always just fall into a job. You sometimes have to spend lots of time volunteering and applying. So it can be a little bit of a long journey to get there. It was for me, but it's rewarding and worthwhile work. So if you're interested, make sure it's definitely for you. And you might find there's something connected that's similar but slightly different. But yeah, if you're interested, then perhaps spend some time volunteering and see where it takes you. That would be my message.
Amazing, very sage advice. And for anybody interested in volunteering, you can go to the Countryside Job Service, which has a section on volunteering. You can search by the area of the UK that you live in as well to find those opportunities. And that's a great try before you spend your life doing it kind of message as well. So I really love that. Thank you. I'm going to do final thanks in a second, but thank you to everybody for coming along and spending time and listening to this, and for your questions as well. It's really appreciated. The video from this session will be loaded up in the next couple of hours, but the resource that Ajay mentioned in the video, where you can draw your own seasonal calendar, is already available for download from the Green Jobs for Nature website. There's there is already a quiz, Green Jobs for Nature quiz on the website for your learners to take part in as well, which highlights to an ideal role in the sector for them. So that's something they can take part into if they want to. So all that's left for me to do is to thank you all for taking part in listening, and massive thank you to Ajay for taking the time to spend with us, showing us around Wicken Fen, and for talking to us about his job. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Amazing. Right, enjoy your day, everybody, and we will see you soon.